Welcome to the Revolution of Man podcast. I'm your host, Lance Cashion. This is episode 25. This podcast is an extension of my blog at Substack. So you can go to Revolution of Man at Substack and you can read my blog and see all the different content that I have there. You can become a paid subscriber for $6 a month and get exclusive content and also support my work. And again, that's at Revolution of Man on Substack. This is episode 25, and this is a special episode. We're doing a series at TCU, Texas Christian University, a Worldview Series, a Christian academic series, myself and Dr. Tyler Durham, a good friend of mine, and we're going to be discussing man or machine, a conversation about what it means to be human. So I have to apologize. This episode's getting uploaded a little later than I intended because we recorded at TCU the night before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And that week I would have uploaded it by Friday, but there was a lot going on. I preached that Sunday and then did a memorial service for TPUSA at TCU. And ended up going to Phoenix to Charlie's memorial service. So there was a lot going on and just didn't have time to do the edits and get this thing up. So forgive me for getting it up late, but I'm glad that you're able to see and listen to it now. I serve as the CEO and founder of the Forge Room Foundation. We're equipping Christians with biblical worldview in order to take faithful action in our city. And I serve as well at King's Cross Fellowship as a elder and pastor. So if you're in the Fort Worth area, you'd like to come join us on Sunday to worship God and hear from his word and be in fellowship, you can do that. We meet at 10 a.m. and you can go to kingscrossfellowship.com. And of course, Forge Room is forgeroom.com or forgeroom.org. Forgive me. So this episode, I think you're going to find it to be exciting. Again, it was recorded live at TCU at the University Debate Chamber, myself and Tyler Durham. And please subscribe, share, comment, and enjoy episode 25 of the Revolution of Man podcast. Thanks. God bless. We're going to be discussing man or machine, having just a conversation about what it means to be human. And this quote is from Henry Grunwald, and this was written in Time magazine back in 1992, probably before some of you guys were born. I was still in college, as a matter of fact. Actually, no, I was in high school, 1992. So Henry Grunwald said this, quote, "One of the most remarkable things about the 20th century, more than technological progress and physical violence, has been the deconstruction of man and woman," end quote. So let's start there, Tyler.
Yeah, the deconstruction of man and woman. We, 2 weeks ago, we talked about who am I? Christian identity. How do you form your identity? And as we were talking about the theme tonight, the natural next question is what is a human? And to the point of that quote, which was 30 plus years ago, in the modern culture, we've deconstructed the concept of human. And so, as you and I get started, I'd mentioned to you the other day that Francis Schaeffer's kind of helped me understand this on a macro level.
Right.
Philosophically, how have we gotten to the point to where humanity is up for grabs in terms of how we define it?
Yeah.
How we define man and woman. How do we define sexuality? How do we define body and soul? Is there a soul in man, or is man just the physical?
Right.
And so what I want to do is, as we're starting, is pull up the slide from Schaeffer to be kind of to set the framework for a conversation. So Francis Schaeffer really, I think, is the first one to talk about this idea of an upper and lower story. And you and I have talked about that a lot.
Right.
In fact, we were talking about it in my office the other day, and you had mentioned Plato as really the first one to talk about upper and lower story with the particulars and the universal. So elaborate on that.
Well, it was just a framework of understanding an overarching meta narrative versus what we experience in life, the material world, and so Plato broke this up into this upper story, which we're calling the upper story. He called it the universals, and then the particulars in the lower story. But he was just trying to figure out the difference between. It seems like what he knew to be true, that's more as a part of reason and metaphysics, but is not tangible, not of the material world, and then what he knew to be true factually in the material world. He's like breaking things up.
The essence.
Yeah.
So a table has the essence of a table. It has tableness.
Right.
And there's a variety of tables, but what ties them all together is their tableness, or
dogs.
Dogs.
Like you have a picture of a dog in your head. All dogs, they don't look like fish. They look like dogs. And then that got worked out through philosophy over hundreds of years, and people use that same framework, the upper and the lower, and then they started changing the names between universals
so on
and particulars.
You can keep that slide for a second. So the upper story universals, lower story particulars, that concept, we have two other words up there, grace and nature.
Yeah.
And that's been a riddle that philosophers and theologians have tried to solve since the days of Plato and probably before, is how do we know the things that are in the physical world? And then how do we know the things that are in the immaterial spiritual world? And one of the things that Schaeffer helped me with is his discussion of Immanuel Kant and how he tried to work this out. And so when you think about the upper and lower story, he talked about in the upper story was this noumena, is what he called it. This is a knowledge of the things that are essentially behind the curtain, things like love and grace and God and the spiritual realm. And then the lower story is the phenomena, things that you can taste, touch, feel, and see. Your perception can discover those things.
But he believed that they were both real, though.
Kant. He did. He was trying to preserve the religion and God and morality, and the way he tried to do that was by separating it into a different category. And the problem is, he said, we don't have access to knowledge of that category.
Right.
So the noumena, it's real, but we can't ever get access to it.
Which
the only thing we can discover causes a big problem.
Right.
The only thing we can know for certain are the things that we can taste, touch, feel, and see. And so grace, God, morals, values, beliefs are in the upper story. The lower story, science, mathematics, the things that you can discover in the natural world.
And that led, because you're a church historian, so you've got more of a history background than I do. So what did that lead to whenever that division is taken to its, its logical conclusions?
Well, I mean, over time, if you're telling, generations of people that we can't know for sure anything in the upper story, then the upper story is just subjective.
Just collapses.
Well, it's everybody's personal preference.
Right.
We don't have access to it. And so the real work, the real thinking, the real brilliant minds were being applied to the lower story, nature, the scientific method. And you start to see the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution. And very gradually, man started thinking, you know what, we can figure out and solve man's problems just in the lower story. That's all we need is nature. Nature, reason, science, and for our discussion tonight, technology can solve all of man's problems.
And so morality, spirituality, metaphysical is just out the window.
It's inaccessible.
Yeah.
We can't know why these things exist, but we can know what these things are.
Right.
And so a few more points on that. If we go to the next slide.
So describe, since this is a podcast, you kind of have to describe it.
Great point. So on the slide, you have essentially a line in the middle. Above the line is grace. Below the line is nature. And the above the line are the universals that Plato talks about, the essence of things. And as I mentioned, God the Creator, heaven, heavenly things, the unseen realm, man's soul, love, morality, and then these are big ones. Meaning and purpose are all above the line. They're in the upper story. Lower story is nature, the particulars, the parts, the things that are of the earth, the visible realm, man's body, science, mathematics, reason, rationality, and the utility of the parts. And so that's where all of the really the focus is applied. And here's what Schaeffer said, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. He said one of the most important points with this divide, as you look at especially Western society, is that the lower story always ends up eating the upper story.
Right.
And what he meant by that is that the lower things start to take precedent over the higher things.
Right.
If we don't have access to the higher things, if they're not really relevant to the day-to-day operations of this world, if we can't even have access to those things to define who we are as humans, then we just define humans based on the things that are in the lower story.
And you're in a closed off system, essentially. I mean, you're in a put yourself in a box. And then that leads to materialism, radical individualism, all of those things, because then it's only what you can measure.
Man is simply made up of its parts. And this is, man becomes a machine.
Right.
In our technological world, we define man as a machine.
Yeah.
And the problem with machines are not sin. The problem with machines is, bad programming.
Yeah.
Man needs to be reprogrammed or needs to get new parts.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because being an athlete in college and stuff, always talked about fueling the machine. Like your body's a machine. You need to fuel it properly so that you perform well.
Mm-hmm.
What they meant is feed it good food. Instead of saying that machines are like your body, they were saying that your body is a machine. And you're like, oh yeah, my body's a machine.
Yep.
And you just take that on as a part of who you are, but it goes under the surface. You're not apprehending that idea. It's just coming straight in, but it can lead to all kinds of other bad ideas.
It makes me think of Marshall McLuhan wrote a book called The Medium is the Message.
Right.
And I think one of the arguments he was making is that when television was invented, the fact that man started receiving information through the television started shaping the message.
Yeah.
Started changing the message. And I think when you start describing humans with the analogy of machine or computer or using technological categories, that actually starts to affect how we understand what a human is. Yeah. That analogy becomes the main thing.
Right.
It ceases to be an analogy at some point.
Right.
And it becomes the message.
It's funny because I sit here with my iPhone, my pocket idol, and I remember the first time I saw an iPhone. A friend of mine, Jamie, had one, and I had one of those Palm, whatever they were, digital things that had the buttons on it, like a BlackBerry. They don't even make
I had one of those.
And
how do we type things on those?
I had no idea. I had no idea. And I'm sitting there with this thing, and I think it's pretty cool because it had like a camera on it, but it was terrible. And then he comes out and shows me this iPhone, and there's no buttons. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing in the world. It's never going to work. Boy, was I wrong. But now look at it. Now I can't go anywhere with it's like an appendage.
Did the CEO of Microsoft at one point, he was doing an interview with one of the news stations or cable news, and they brought up, Steve Jobs is doing this thing called an iPhone, and he kind of laughed like, a device that can do everything,
right.
Not just texting or phone calls, but movies and music and all that. He kind of scoffed at it. And
and then it was weird that phones had cameras. I was like, that's strange.
Yeah, he mentioned cameras too.
Why would your phone need a camera? I'm like, why wouldn't your phone need a camera today? I mean, you need it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it has the effect, not just of social media, but just the fact that we have these devices that are so powerful. They shape
what it means to be a human.
Yeah, it shapes our lives. Like, I've got a bad habit of picking this thing up first thing in the morning because it's my alarm. And then what I do is check my email
do things like that. Worst thing I do is get on social media and watch the world's on fire, and that's the first thing I see in the morning. I should be in God's Word or praying or something. Like, no, it's
Shaping.
It's shaping.
Yeah.
And it's powerful. Back to the,
So the technology, how it shapes us. This is a book called "The Five Forces That Change Everything: How Technology is Shaping Our Future." I want to read this passage at the end, because a lot of these futurists and technocrats, they're, although the system is closed, God and morality's in the upper story, they still believe there's a lot of things that man can accomplish in this closed system. And so I just want to read a few things from here. You tell me what you think. This is his summary of the book. Like, this is the culmination of forces, these five forces. He says, we will also begin to transcend the limitations of our physical bodies. As bioconvergence accelerates, it may become commonplace to upgrade our organs and other body parts with superior bionic and lab-grown versions. And they've even talked about 3D printing organs in the future. With advances in bioengineering and genetics, we will eventually eradicate our most deadly diseases, including cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and malaria. At the same time, we can expect to dramatically extend our lifespans and may even conquer aging altogether. So that phrase,
boy, do I need that.
Conquer aging altogether, that's essentially saying conquer death.
Right.
Let me read a few more things here. What will happen when we take evolution into our own hands? Gene editing tools could also re-engineer our own DNA so that our entire species becomes smarter and more capable. We may be able to design not only our babies' look, but what types of personalities they have. This will enable us to perform biosocial engineering on an unprecedented scale, endowing people with more empathy for one another, eliminating homicidal tendencies, and increasing our capacity for happiness. We could even cease to be Homo sapiens as we diverge into one or more superhuman species. And he goes on and talks about cyber entities and freeing our consciousness to inhabit robots or smart devices. This is a brave new world. And he closes by saying, at some point, he asks this question, at some point, will humans and our machines become indistinguishable from one another? That's the question we're asking tonight. Man or machine? What is man? Is man, and Schaeffer calls it the mannishness of man.
Right.
There is a personality and a humanness and the image-bearing nature of man. That's the essence of man. A lot of the technocrats today are saying, no, man is simply another machine that we can continue to tinker with and update and upgrade and eventually transcend what we've known to be man up to this point to become this merging of human and machine.
Cyborgs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a science fiction world. As I listen, I'm like, this is nuts. This is crazy. But you saw the story the other day with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping.
Right.
There was a hot mic overhearing their conversation, and they were kind of saying, with organ harvesting and the latest technology, that they could see themselves living to 150 170
life
years
extension.
Old.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's when you read that, it sounds far out there, but the fact that that human beings created in God's image are capable of thinking that and then start trying to implement those type of ideas. And then, with that conversation between Putin and Xi Jinping, is you had those are two world leaders that are discussing this idea. And I mean, what happens when the materialist who doesn't believe in the image of God, that every human being is created in the image of God with intrinsic value, worth, dignity, and purpose, when they start to speak like that, then what happens to the people that are the ones that are going to be giving their organs or their organs will be harvested from them so that these men can live longer.
Well, it's kind of a Marxist idea of, hey, we want everybody to be equal and happy and everyone to live forever, everyone to have access to the latest technologies, and we want to cure, poverty and famine and diseases. But in reality, the world, the proletariat are just going to be the guinea pigs that are experimented on to discover these new technologies that are only going to be accessible to the elites, the few.
Right, and you have because Os Guinness talks about is that you have the ideal within that the Marxian type of naturalistic vision, and then you have reality. And in order for reality to catch up to the ideal, people are going to have to be sacrificed in order to get to the ideal.
Yeah,
because here's the ideal, and there's all this space between reality as it is and the ideal. What do you have to do? Well, you're going to have to engineer your way up there. And if people aren't created in the image of God and people are in the way, then you're going to have to get people out of the way. And that's been the story of history.
Man can't live without the universals, without the upper story. And so what ends up happening is the things in the lower story start to become everything.
Right.
And so the answer to man's dilemma, the answer to meaning and purpose is technology and extending life on earth. That becomes the main thing.
Transcend it.
Transcend it, yeah.
Yeah.
And Thomas Sowell wrote a book called Conflict of Visions, and he said that, this vision, this materialist vision is a unrestricted vision. And he uses vision like we use worldview.
Right.
It's unrestrained is actually what he said. It's unrestrained. Whereas what he said was a more conservative vision, we would say a more conservative Christian worldview, is restrained. There are limits. Mm-hmm. God has created reality. There is real reality, as Schaeffer says.
Right, right.
And if you buck up against that, it's not going to budge. And so we as Christians, we operate within a restrained world. And the irony is that, when you have certain restraints, you can actually experience more freedom.
That's right.
If you submit to those restraints. In an effort to have unrestrained freedom, you end up becoming a slave to, chance and determinism and technology and all the things in the lower story. Man's problem is all, it's all mathematics, it's all data, it's all physical.
Mm-hmm. Structures around him, or that's why with the transhumanist vision, I know we'll talk more about that, is the last oppression of human beings is the body, the biological. And it's interesting because the upper story is going to break through at some point. So you have to have the transcendent, this is where we need to go. And it's always a place that transcends the natural. So we need to liberate ourselves from the biological. We're going to get cancer. We're going to get sick. We're gonna die. So how do we transcend death?
Well, a lot of them. We're gonna colonize Mars. We're gonna create cryogenics, and we're gonna freeze our. This is really happening. There's wealthy billionaires that have signed contracts to have their brains frozen, so that one day, once technology catches up, then they can essentially be resurrected to inhabit a robot or a computer. I don't know, but that stuff is happening. It's once again, it's back to Schaeffer. Man can't live without the upper story, and so what individuals have to do that live in this closed system is take a leap of faith.
Right.
And it's irrational. But if they were to not do that and be consistent with their materialistic worldview, it would lead them to despair and nihilism. There is no morality. There is no meaning. There is no purpose.
Right.
And because man can't live that way, they have to take these leaps of faith into the irrational. And I was reading this book in preparation for tonight. It's called On the Future, Prospects for Humanity. Martin Rees. He's an astronomer royal, and has been master of Trinity College and director of the Institute of Astronomy at Cambridge University. Brilliant guy. And he spends the whole book laying out this kind of utopian vision of the future with all of these exciting, optimistic things. And he has a chapter on what about God? He has a chapter on what about God? And here's what he says, and this is what I'm talking about with this leap of faith. So the whole book, he describes himself as an atheist, and he's very critical of theology and the intelligent design scientists and their view that creation was made by something outside of it, a designer, a creator. And then he says this is the leap of faith, that either you live a life of despair and nihilism, or you take a leap of faith. Here's what he says. Brilliant guy. I would describe myself as a practicing but unbelieving Christian. The parallel concept is familiar among Jews. There are many who follow traditional observances, lighting candles on Friday nights and so forth, but this need not mean that they accord their religion any primacy, still less that they claim it has any unique truth. They may even describe themselves as atheists. Likewise, as a cultural Christian, I'm content to participate, albeit irregularly, in the rituals of the Anglican Church with which I've been familiar since early childhood. Hardline atheists focus too much, however, on religious dogma and on what is called natural theology, seeking evidence of the supernatural in the physical world. They must be aware of religious people who are manifestly neither unintelligent or naive. So he criticizes what he calls hardline atheists. Those would be atheists that are trying to live consistently with their worldview.
Yeah.
He's admitting, I'm choosing not to live consistently with what I really believe is true.
Right.
That's called an irrational leap of faith.
Right. It's over rationalism ends up being irrational.
Yeah, and then that's what Schaeffer talks about, is that ultimately you have to take the leap of faith into the irrational. And when you look at what a lot of these technocrats are saying about the possibilities of the future, I got to be honest with you, it's so far outside of the realm of possibility, according to my beliefs from a Christian worldview, that they're not realizing the restraints that God has put on the world. And it reminds me of like the Tower of Babel.
Right.
You know, it happened only like 150, 200 years after the flood. So God judged the world,
right,
and it was catastrophic, and restarted with Noah's family. And as Noah's family began to repopulate, what are they afraid of? They're afraid of God's judgment. And many of them reject God, and they say, you know what? We're going to build a building that is so high it reaches to the heavens, and God, you can't do anything to stop us.
And what
Your floods aren't going to do anything with this building.
Right. And what were they doing? They were making a name for themselves.
Making a name for themselves.
And in the naming in Scripture, all the way back to Genesis, when God creates Adam, and then he creates the creatures. This is before he created Eve. And God brings all the creatures before Adam to see what he would name them.
Yeah.
And God didn't name the creatures for Adam. He brought them before Adam, and then he was responsible for naming. So he'd given him the authority and responsibility for naming the creatures. There's a giraffe, there's a hippopotamus, there's a platypus. He names all these creatures, and whatever their name was, that's what they were. But what's interesting in the naming is there's an authority over the naming, kind of to your point with Babel. They wanted to make a name for themselves. So what are they trying to do? They usurp authority and make a name for themselves. They'd already been given a name. Yeah. You know, and so what happens to Babel? It just turns into a mess.
Well, and
we're doing that again with technology. There's a parallel going on between
what we're doing today. Technology too.
You know what? Good point.
Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah.
Noah.
Or just using a different technology to do it.
Yeah, the boat was a new technology. You know, it never existed before, and he used it for God's purposes according to God's plan. Babel was a man-centered technology that rejected God, and God had a way of thwarting their plans
Yeah.
by confusing their languages. And so,
Who's the author of that book that you just
this
mentioned?
one, Martin Rees.
Martin Rees. That reminds me. His is Richard Dawkins recently.
Cultural, he said, I'm a cultural
I'm a
Christian.
cultural Christian now.
Yeah, because
One of the
you can't
hardline
live-
atheists, is now you can't it's unlivable. Like your worldview has to be livable within reality. The more a worldview comports with God's reality, the more that it is livable, that you can live this out.
Yeah.
And back to the life extension thing, I have to wonder, would I really want to live 150, 200 years on a fallen planet with all the sin and death and all that, and seeing loved ones and generations, just your friends? I mean,
If this is all that there is, you bet. If this is all that there is, absolutely. You're going to do whatever means necessary to extend your life on earth. And it's funny, even in these books, they describe it as resurrection.
They have to borrow.
Well, but
they have to borrow.
But death has already been conquered.
Yeah.
They're trying to conquer death, but death has already been conquered in Christ. But it requires human beings to submit to the one who conquered death.
Right. And they're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, Romans 1.
Yeah. So what is a human? I think one of the points in what we just said, what is a human? A human is a worshiping being.
We're built for worship.
We're built for worship. And so even those who say, we don't believe in anything in the upper story, we don't have access to that, we're just going to focus on the things that are in the perceivable world. That's all that matters. They can't not worship something.
Yeah.
And you look at a guy like Elon Musk, who's done a lot of amazing things and some very good things. But I mean, his life mission is colonizing Mars. Like that is his vision. That is his utopia. That's
right.
That's what he worships, is the pursuit of those ends.
And those idols make poor masters. I mean, they crush you. If you don't worship the one and true God through Jesus Christ, then you will. Your idol will crush you. Because you will run into the reality of sin, and God gives us over to a debased mind, futile thinking, and a darkened heart, and it's almost like he'll second your motion. Like, if you want to follow that, go, but know that that's not going to end well. And then you start. That's when you have the idea. And we've had this discussion. Can man transcend the body and become a machine? The answer.
Well, I asked that question 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's impossible, because when you read God's word, which is the truth about total reality, and that there is a resurrection, that nowhere in the Bible does it have anything remotely like that. So it all breaks down. There is a resurrection, like in Christ, forgiveness of sins, but our bodies will be reunited with our bodies, which is incredible. Our souls will be reunited with our bodies, and we'll be who we are in a glorified body, without sin, without death, illness, all of those things, in a glorified body. And that's what it really means to be human. I mean, you have, it's interesting that the human capability made in God's image is so powerful and creative that even when we go the wrong direction, it's still powerful. Like, we're able to do some things the wrong way really well.
Mm-hmm.
We're capable of doing some terrible things really well when it comes to we're trying to transcend who we are, our bodies, or God's reality.
All these inventions and advancements in technology have come from minds that were given to them by God.
Yeah.
God is the author of Elon Musk and the author of Elon Musk's innovations. So one of the things that's helpful as I was studying up on this is that as Christians, we have to remember that nothing is outside of God's sovereignty.
Right.
And for reasons that oftentimes we don't fully understand,
Mm-mm.
he uses man's pursuit of their own self-glorification to accomplish his purposes. He uses man's uh, developments with technology, whether it's in warfare or genetics or biological warfare, all of these things that can be used for evil. God can use and direct them for his purposes, and his ways are much higher than our ways. But it is helpful as Christians to remember that there's never going to be, and I'm totally comfortable saying this.
Yeah.
There will never be a transcending of human beings on earth.
Of our bodies.
Yeah,
Of our bodies into machines or anything else.
Yeah, like human beings are the highest form of God's creation. And if we were to make advancements that challenge that, then God's going to thwart those plans just like he's done previously. He's patient up to a point, but there are hard and fast boundaries to this reality that we can't overcome.
Yeah.
So,
well, I want to, real quick, since we've got slides here, I wanted to go, because you touched on something, and I hope that I have it here. The questions like with technology, like, or anything in life, these are the 4 questions, worldview questions, because we come in contact with ideas and technology. And as Christians, there's 4 questions that we can ask, and we've talked about this a lot. Is the first question is, what is good that we can celebrate, promote, and protect? The second question is, what is evil that we can stop or fight? The third question is, what is missing that we can create or contribute? And the fourth question is, what is broken that we can restore? And when I think about, let's say, medical technology, in the history of medical technology, medicine traditionally was used to restore. If someone had lost a leg or a limb in battle or something like that, man came up with a prosthetic. They contributed something good to make us whole. Interventions with medicine and surgery is to make people whole again. You were ill or you were injured. It was to make you whole. So we come up with a prosthetic, or we come up with a treatment to make you whole again. But there's been this shift to where now it's not just making someone whole, it's making someone different. It's adding to the human body, the human mind, like Elon Musk with the Neuralink and things like that. It's like we can become,
but
it's just interesting.
Problem with that, though?
With
the Neuralink thing, as an example?
I don't fully understand what all it does. From what I've read, that there could be some medical, some positive medical outcomes, meaning that it may be able to help people with memory that have Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that. But the others
paralyzed that would be able to,
or maybe they have strokes or have some.
Would you get one if you were paralyzed and it can give you?
That's a great question, man. I don't know. I don't know if I would, because if maybe in God's providence I'm supposed to be paralyzed. I wouldn't want to.
Well, but I had asthma as a kid. I could just say maybe in God's providence he wants me to have asthma and not take medicine to.
Well, you could take medicine's different than having a
brain chip
put in your.
Or what about a pacemaker?
A pacemaker, yeah. I think that's a different story. This is because I don't know what all it does, what a Neuralink does. So that's kind of out of my realm of knowledge.
Yeah.
If it could help someone that has a cognitive issue or something like that, then I think that, hey, it might be worth thinking about. But then it's like, what are the implications of it? What else is it doing? Or what else is it capable of doing? Is it just doing this? And then what are the negative potential outcomes of putting a chip in your brain? Because it has radiation, does it cause cancer? Now you've got something,
to it,
I just don't know enough about it. What do you think?
Yeah. I would give it a shot. If I was paralyzed and there was proof that it could give me, the ability to use my legs, or if I had dementia and it could, improve my memory and extend my quality of life. I don't know, the risk reward for people in those situations, the reward most likely would outweigh the risk. For your normal person that's like, oh, I could get a chip put in my brain and be smarter or whatever. I think that's where,
Or that's where it goes to making someone whole, to then making someone
advanced.
Advanced, or being another appendage to their minds. It's like putting an iPhone in your brain. I've been watching shows on, I don't know how many people have the Apple Glass, it's not Apple Glass, the Apple goggles or whatever they are. I mean, it's incredible what people are doing. I was watching a guy like doing this in the air. He had the headset on and he was doing this. He looked foolish just out in the open in the crowd
swinging
doing this.
Into air.
It's like, Tai Chi or something. I was like, but when it showed the screen, what he was seeing, he was just surfing the internet, looking at maps, checking his bank account with this headset on, but he could still see out, but he was actually seeing through a camera. It wasn't through the glass itself. So with technology, it's hard because it does change what it means to be human. And humans are going to be, we're frail, we're gonna get sick, that doesn't mean we can't try to do interventions. I think doctors and surgeons that are trying to make us whole again, that's a good thing. But then implementing technology in such a way where it changes who you are, that's another
the ethical
situation altogether. That's why it's like, okay, what's good that we can celebrate? It's like, well, we have these technology. God's blessed man with so many technologies. And I mean, you think about the suffering just 200 years ago from diseases and things like that. And then you fast forward today, it's like the things that killed people 200 years ago don't kill people like that anymore. I mean, and you look at these advanced technologies, so there's some good things that we can celebrate and protect, but there's also some things that are evil or bad that we must stop. And that's where the Christian can come in with a biblical worldview and say, wait a second, what is that for? What is the purpose? Where does this lead? How can it be misused? Like CRISPR technology, which is gene editing. People trying to have children they want, brown eyes and blonde hair, or they want to have children that are have a chance to be more intelligent, and they're editing the genes of children, which
designer babies,
but I'm like, is that right? Is that good, true, and beautiful in the eyes of God? Because I know families that have Down syndrome children, and back when I was a kid, and we're close to the same age, there were children with special
ballpark.
Yeah, you're what, 2 years older than me?
40.
No, I'm just kidding. But I remember when I was a kid, there were kids with special needs all around, and then as I got older, there weren't littles around. And then what I found was that in researching particularly in the pro-life realm, is that a lot have been chosen to abort because your child you do this test, and there's a high probability your child could have Down syndrome or some type of issue, and then the family aborts the child. But if you've ever interacted with families with special needs children, I mean, these children are a blessing from God, just the way that they are. They're made in God's image. Do they have challenges? Yeah, theirs are different challenges than ours, but that doesn't make them any less valuable.
Well, this actually brings up a good point, in that the worldview is it's almost like if there's deficiencies, then it's not worth existing. If there's problems with the parts, then maybe it's not worth existing. If there's suffering, maybe it's not worth bringing someone into this world. How many people have you heard say, why would I want to bring a child into this world?
Right.
You look at the population rates around the Western world is plummeting, and a lot of it is that kind of logic that this is a difficult, painful world, and I don't want to bring somebody into that. And when you look at a lot of these billions of dollars going into advanced technology, it's to alleviate pain, suffering, and problems. But then you read the New Testament, and it's like suffering seems to be a key part of life in a fallen world, and God uses that in a very important way, in a way that He has to use like nothing else. Suffering like nothing else can get man's attention and cause us to make the changes we need to make to be better people, to be more godly, to be better husbands, better fathers.
Right.
And if you're trying to create a world where that is alleviated, you've just cut yourself off from some of the most important things to develop us. Our morality, our character, our meaning and purpose is
Right.
going through, enduring, and learning from suffering.
Yeah, the suffering, you bring that up. I remember when my dad got cancer years ago, he passed away from it. He had pancreatic cancer, and I was talking to a good friend of ours, a pastor, and my dad was semi-serious about his faith. And this pastor, good friend of ours, sat me down and he's like, God is going to use the pain of this cancer to get your father's attention. And you're going to see something come out of him. And that was true, because the last couple months of his life, I mean, he was suffering, but he was more alive than, I mean, everything, all the superficial, the lower story stuff faded away, because all he could see was his Savior and the truth.
And the only way you could see that was through faith.
Through faith, and then God bringing suffering. So it is suffering in a it's crazy to say it, but it's true that it is a means of grace that God uses in our lives to capture our attention, but also capture our hearts, to remove the idols, all the things, so that we can see. When you're in pain, you want relief. When you're grieving, you want relief. And then that's, where do you turn? Well, God.
Well, and I want to be clear on, I said faith, and we were just talking about the leap of faith that many of these people.
Right.
The leap of faith that these individuals are taking is a contentless faith. There is no object.
Yeah.
It's just, it's irrational. There's no content to it. It's faith and faith. It's hope and hope. The faith that you're describing with the situation has an object.
Yeah.
And so faith is not the answer. It's faith in a particular object. And that object is a person,
right?
Jesus Christ, who is fully God and fully man. And when that is the substance and content of your faith, it allows you to endure the things in this world that cause suffering and heartache. And it helps you navigate this world like no other religion or belief system or irrational faith.
Right.
It's about the object of the faith. That's the game changer.
And you think of like Johnny Erickson Tata. She's, quadriplegic. And she has incredible faith.
She's an artist. She paints with her mouth, the brush in her mouth.
I mean, it's incredible. But you see, if you hear her story, what she thought she would be apart from that isn't who she is today. So God used her accident and her weakness for His glory. Mm-hmm. It's always, if you're in Christ and you're suffering and you're in pain, loss, whatever that is, that He will use that. And not only for yourself, but for others, because you bear fruit. Your life bears fruit. And so I think we have this aversion as a culture to pain, death, loss, grief. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to even think about it. We push it to the side when all of that is a part of being human.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of the human experience. You don't know how much you love something until you lose it.
100%. Recently you were talking about you were looking through C.S. Lewis's book, That Hideous Strength.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, like 1984, Brave New World, do a great job of describing this dystopian society and worldview, but they were writing from a secular perspective. Lewis is writing from a Christian perspective on the same subject of these dystopian worlds created by technology and science and man's reason. How does C.S. Lewis contribute to this conversation?
So you have really the two novels that most people think about are 1984 and Brave New World. But I've come to learn recently, thanks to my 16-year-old son, who's a Lewis fanatic, that I read Abolition of Man, and then I read That Hideous Strength, which is part of the Ransom series, and it's called the Space Trilogy, but it's really technically the Ransom series. But what Lewis is up to is he has a deep theological understanding of both the lower and the upper levels.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Christian, and ultimately, what That Hideous Strength is about is that there is a man is trying to master himself. Is that he's mastered nature, he's mastered the world around him, mastered it, or conquered it, maybe be a better word for it. But the last thing to conquer is man himself. And so what he does in That Hideous Strength is that he has they've retrieved a brain, talking about people that are freezing their brains. So they've retrieved the brain of a criminal, and they have basically set up all this technology around it where it communicates, but it's demonic. And it's telling this group called the NICE, which is the National Institute for Coordinated Experiments. Okay. They call it NICE. Imagine that. Yeah. And this was, That Hideous Strength was written in 1945. I mean, so he was ahead of his time. But here's a quote from that book, and I think it nails it. It says, quote, "Man has got to take charge of man. That means, remember that some men have got to take charge of the rest, which is another reason for cashing in on it as soon as we can. You and I want to be the people that are taking charge, not the ones taken charge of." And this, Mark Studdock is the guy that Lord Featherstone is talking to. Mark Studdock replies, "What sort of thing have you in mind?" And Lord Featherstone continues, "Quite simple and obvious things. First, at sterilization of the unfit, liquidation of backward races, we don't want any dead weights. Selective breeding, then real education, including prenatal education. By real education, I mean the one that has no take it or leave it nonsense. A real education makes the patient, this is the person, what it wants infallibly, whatever he or his parents try to do about it. So who cares what the parents say? Mm-hmm. We're going to educate them. Of course, it'll have to be mainly psychological at first, but we'll get to the biomedical conditioning in the end and the direct manipulation of the brain." I mean, that's crazy. And that's 1945. And because Lewis is a theologian and a Christian apologist, when you read 1984 in Brave New World, the king sits on top, and that's That Hideous Strength.
Yeah.
Because it gives the theological depth, and you're like, he's spot on. I mean, we're kind of living in that hideous strength type of environment now with technology and life extension.
Jacques Ellul, who's a philosopher, and he's kind of hard to pin down, a French philosopher and theologian. And,
right.
But he calls it power knowledge. So that hideous strength, that technological power or technological knowledge, he calls power knowledge. Because when you remove all the things in the upper story, which are things that have to do with God
Yeah.
and the soul and morality, ethics, purpose, meaning. All that's left is power. Morality just becomes a tool for manipulation to gain power.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody really believes in an objective morality. Everybody has their own subjective morality, which we're going to talk about next time. What's true for you may not be true for me.
Right.
And so then it just becomes, who can wield technological power to gain control? And that Lewis quote, or one of the things that Lewis said, we reduce all things to mere nature so that we can control and conquer all things.
Right.
But the price of conquest is to reduce all things to mere nature. So that's the world we're living in. And as Christians, we, what I would want to say to the listeners of this or those in the room is that we have a much better story. We have a much better story. Christianity has a totalizing worldview. We don't have to separate morality and God and the soul into a unknown category. From our worldview, all of God's knowledge is accessible. Why? Because God has revealed himself in nature through general revelation.
Right.
And he's revealed
Creation
himself.
speaks.
Creation speaks. And,
Yeah.
and then he's revealed himself in terms of the unseen realm through his specific revelation in the scriptures. So we have nature, we have general revelation telling us how to understand the world.
Yeah.
And the scientific revolution would not have burst onto the scene apart from God's general revelation and the Christian understanding of that there is an order to the universe.
And that order is to be discovered, that the universe and the world and everything in it is intelligible. And that man's pursuit of knowledge of the world around him, science, is to pursue what someone said, that you're thinking God's thoughts after him, that you're actually discovering what God has already created.
Because there's
in reality.
If it was all random, then we really wouldn't be able to
be
have
unintelligible
patterns to study. It would be, if it's all random, why does the sun need to come up tomorrow?
Right.
So the idea that as Christians, there was a belief that there's an order to the universe and there's patterns and systems that you can depend on allowed for the scientific revolution.
Yeah. And you back to the stories that we're created in God's image, and then we are given intrinsic value, worth, dignity, purpose, the amazing abilities just naturally that God created, and then we're placed in a story. And that story is much bigger than any other story that a naturalist, materialist could ever come up with. It's the story of all stories, and at the center of it is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He is risen, is the center of total reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as Christians, and I've done this, is I've somehow get bogged down between the fall and sin and redemption, the cross. I forget creation and restoration. So you have creation, fall, redemption, restoration. Those are the 4 chapters of the Bible that were set in a story. And when we're redeemed in Christ, we're a part of that story. Jesus doesn't become a part of my story. I'm a part of his story. He invites me into his story, redeems me, and then uses my gifts, talents, my faults, everything as a part of his story. So we're part of the redemptive story, and yet oftentimes we don't share that with the world that's looking for these others to go into Mars or transcending our human bodies to become parts of machines because we don't want to die or age. We have a better story, but we oftentimes just don't share that.
So to summarize some of these points, okay, so what is a human? A human is a worshiping being.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. I don't care how brilliant your mind is. We were made to worship. And so if you've rejected God, then you're going to put something else in that place. You're going to raise up an idol. We've seen it throughout the biblical storyline in human history. We see it every day. And so that's one big thing. Secondly, human beings are created in the image of God, body and soul. A lot of this stuff in this literature can only operate if human beings are just purely matter.
Right.
That we're just machines. We're the problem with human beings is developing and inventing new techniques and new ways to solve the problems in the machine. From a Christian view, we're not a machine. We're not matter. We're body and soul. We're physical and spiritual beings welded together.
And that's why it says, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Strength is the body.
Yeah. All of who you are.
All of who you are.
And so there really is something behind the eyes, a consciousness. We really are more than just the chemicals firing in our brains and the biological hardwiring. We're not, and that leads to a third point, human beings are not deterministic. God has given us freedom to operate in this world. And before the fall, Adam and Eve had a free will that was free to do good or do evil. After the fall, our will has been so tainted by sin that we need God's intervention to lead us towards the things that are good and holy and right. But we're body and soul. We have a consciousness. We're made in the image of God. We're personal beings because we were created by a personal God.
And we're relational. We're hardwired for relationship. With God, ourselves, with others, and creation.
Yeah.
Like we can't forget creation. They go, oh, it's just others. No, God in Genesis 1 and 2 says, be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, care and tend. Basically, we have a mandate in order to be, we're creative just like God, not in the same aspects as God, all powerful, but we have creative capabilities to steward this planet, have relationships, and be God's ambassadors in the world. And that's incredible because no other worldview offers that.
Yeah.
Like created in the image of your gods? Nah. All the gods are created in the image of man. Only the one true God. And he became man.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So I think if you have any final thoughts, we probably need to get to a couple of questions.
Yeah,
if there are any.
I think for me, my final thought would be, what is man's dilemma? If the answer to that is from a closed system that denies access to morality and to meaning and purpose, then man's problem is a technological problem. It's a problem of a deficiency in the machine that is our body.
Right.
And the pursuit of that individual is going to be constantly trying to manipulate and change the physical body, and they'll never address the real issues of the soul. If you're looking at it from a Christian worldview, man's dilemma is sin. We have rebelled against a holy and righteous God, and our problem is that we have been separated from the author of our lives, the
Right.
creator and sustainer of the universe. And until we reconcile with that God by acknowledging our sin and repenting of that, there is no restoration by just tinkering with the physical world.
Yeah.
The restoration has to happen internally
Right.
by dealing with sin. Sin is the problem
With the world.
of which man needs to solve,
Right.
not mechanisms and technique. Technique can't fix that.
Right. Right.
So that would be my biggest thing is until that question is answered appropriately from a biblical worldview, all of the excitement you might have that you can extend your life, it's going to extend a life that's separated from God and that is a life that doesn't really experience true joy and happiness.
Right.
So that would be my final thoughts on that.
And I'd just leave it with, I thought about this as I was preparing for this. I was like, well, what does it mean to be truly human? in this world. And so to be truly human, we must allow God's redemptive and sanctifying work to form and shape us into the image of Jesus Christ until we meet him.
Love it.
And that's what it is to be human. Come, with illness, loss, joys, pain, all of that is that it's all, for the Christian, it's forming and shaping you into who? The image
The
of
perfect
the Son.
man.
Yeah.
The second Adam.
That's right.
Yeah.
Our King, our Savior,
the God
our
man, Jesus
Redeemer,
Christ.
who redeemed us, and that we will meet again. We will transcend this world to be eventually reunited. Our souls transcend to be reunited with our bodies.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate.
Yep.
So
love it.
Let's leave it there. And I think, Grant, we've got a couple minutes for questions. So.
Start with easy ones, and then we'll work our way up to the hard ones if we have time.
Are you sure you don't want to start with the hardest one?
Start with some jokes.
Well, we have some great questions tonight, gentlemen. I think I'm going to start with the first question that I received, which is, given the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence, what ethical frameworks should we use to address accountability when a machine's actions cause harm? Is it the developer, the user, or the machine itself that should be held responsible?
I love that question.
That's a great question. Tyler, you go first, man.
Yeah, no, that's a really good ethical question, and I'm sure there's a multitude of case studies we could use to kind of map out how that's a real thing. Let's say you have like a robot maid in your house, and I don't know if you saw that video a while back it was in a Chinese lab, where this robot just started freaking out.
Yeah.
And it was violent,
it was hitting,
and kind of terrifying to see. But what if your robot, turned on somebody that was visiting your home, and hurt them? I think that's what that question's alluding to, is like, who's responsible for that? And I would think, just based on precedent, you could probably sue the maker of that, that robot. You could probably sue the person who owned it and bought it. And so I think in scenarios like that, there's probably more than enough responsibility to go around. But I think that's a great question that we as Christians need to be talking about now, even if we don't really know exactly what that's going to look like. We can't wait till it's on us before we start talking about that. So, and when that question was asked, I was thinking, what about? There's people that think animals should have the same rights as humans today. There's people that think that, and that it's not right the way animals are treated. They should be treated just like humans, and vice versa. Well, I can totally see that happening with these artificial intelligence cyborgs, robots that look like humans, that express themselves like humans, and who's to say people aren't going to start trying to fight for their constitutional rights? And so we're going to have to cross that bridge when we get there. We probably should be talking about that now.
Well, you have a couple questions. One is the question, can we do it? The other question is, should we? With any type of technology, any type of advancement, the should question or the ought question should always be asked. We don't ask that question. We just say, hey, we can do this, let's do it. What came to my mind was artificial intelligence. What's happened, recently is through hallucinations on different artificial intelligent platforms, where somebody will be making queries into the AI, and they end up with, go kill yourself.
Yeah.
Who's responsible?
Thing.
And people have done that. Like, ideas have consequences, bad ideas have victims. So how did that bad idea get in there? And then who do the parents or the spouse or the loved ones, where do they go for justice? Where do they go for justice? Because are you going to sue OpenAI? Or, I mean, what do you do? You've got a dead loved one that was obviously struggling because this was the end result. They take their own lives. But that's a question. I don't think we've gotten to the point of like
moral culpability.
Yeah, how do you get justice from that type of situation? Not just who do you sue? It's like, I want justice. My child was, I don't know if you'd call it murder, but I mean, that's a great question. But that's where my mind went, was the AI hallucination stuff.
So our second question, I think you could take it in a variety of different directions. But what would be the ethical implications of humans overcoming death? Now, as you gentlemen are both aware, right, we could think of that in a biblical sense in terms of our Savior, Jesus Christ, or many people who were resurrected in the Old and New Testament. What are the ethical implications? Maybe for society or for specific individuals?
As far as resurrecting using technology, or you
take it in
either? Well, I agree with Tyler. I mean,
it's not going to happen.
It's not. That's an impossibility based on how God has structured reality and nature itself. It's just because
it's appointed every man wants to die. Like
everybody's going to die, and then the judgment. And so, and everyone will be resurrected, either to judgment or to life in Christ. So there's the two options that you have. So if you have to take, the technology isn't an option. So you're just left with you and God. What are you going to do about Jesus? Because he's the resurrection and the life. He's the truth. He's the way. He is the life. He's the only way to the Father. So then you're faced with a question with two options. Either allow Jesus Christ to deal with your sin, or you carry the weight of your sin and experience God's wrath. But he's made a way to be resurrected and live with him, but yet, because we're sinful, some will choose. And that's the only option. There is a resurrection.
Middle finger to God, honestly.
Yeah.
The resurrection is already, it's established, and yet there are people that have rejected, God's means of resurrection and are wanting to create it on their own terms. They want a resurrection without accountability to a higher being. And, that's the height of hubris, that to say that, to be optimistic that we can conquer death, to call death just another disease that needs to be cured, is the height of our hubris as a society. In no society in the history of civilization has ever gotten to that level of hubris.
It makes me think of Friedrich Nietzsche, where he, staunch atheist, deterministic, will to power, all of those things. Where did that lead him? He went insane.
Yeah.
And when you read stories about his insanity, is what was he saying right before he died? That he was God, that he was Jesus. He was bringing the transcendent back in, and basically, to your point, shaking his fist at God, saying, I am God.
Yeah.
This is where it ends up, is insanity, the futility of the mind and the darkening of the heart, and God.
And Nietzsche lived consistently with his worldview and was very...
That's where it ended up, the logical...
He was very...
consequences.
Off-put by atheists that tried to claim, claim Christian moral principles, and he was very turned off by, the cultural Christians. Like, if you're going to be a Christian, then be a Christian, and if you're going to reject Christianity, then live it. And so he lived out the logical conclusions of a purely materialist worldview.
Yeah,
100%.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our last two questions are somewhat extended, and I believe that to do them justice, I must read them verbatim. They're very good. So perhaps you should consider this. Instead of the question, man or machine, should we instead pose the question, how much man and machine do we want to be? And there's a little bit of follow up here, so I'd like to read it because I think it's relevant. Machines already permeate every facet of our lives. Glasses and prostheses are commonplace. Our cell phones work almost like appendages. Medication for anxiety or ADHD is becoming commonplace, and we increasingly use AI, email, and the internet to communicate and express ourselves. Technology is already used, not just to correct diseases and make us whole again, but to augment us. We don't want to become machines for all the reasons that you've talked about. We'd give up on love and morality, we'd become oblivious to our human limitations, and so forth. But in Genesis, God tells us that we must toil the earth, which implies that tools and technology are part of our nature. So instead of man or machine, should the question be, what kind of balance between man and machine should we strive to achieve?
Love that. Pull up the slide. There's a book by a guy named Neil Postman who wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. This book's called Technopoly. And here's
That
what,
one?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. But here's what he said. He said, and this was written a long time ago, I think in the 50s or 60s, could be wrong on that. But he said it started out, humans are like machines, and we would describe humans, our brain's like a computer. And,
Right.
and we would, but over time, humans became little else than machines. So we started reducing humans to the analogies from machines and technology, which then eventually led to us considering humans, we are machines.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an analogy anymore. It's how we define who we are. And so to the point of the questioner, really societally, we have so merged that we do need to ask the question, what is the balance? I mean, I don't go anywhere without this thing. It in a sense,
It's a pocket idol.
it's my mind,
You're right.
and so I have merged in a sense with the machine. So, what is the balance? I think is what he said at the end, or she said at the end. What is the balance between the two, and how do we as Christians determine what is an appropriate use of technology, and how much should we allow it to enter into our lives? We've talked numerous times, Lance, about using AI with writing, with research, there's so much it can do, but what's the cost of using AI to our own personal thinking? And so what's the balance? What would you say to that?
I think before you, and I'm terrible at this, so this is the ideal, is asking the question, what is it for? Okay, here's a technology. Before I try to find a balance, is asking, what is it for? What is a human made for? What's the purpose of human? What's the purpose of this innovation? Okay, how can it be used for the glory of God? If it can't be used for the glory of God, then we probably ought not to be engaging with it. Because God is the source of all truth, beauty, and goodness. And if we create something that doesn't point beyond itself to a good, true, and beautiful God, then I think we miss the mark. And I'm guilty of absorbing all kinds of ideas and technologies. Like as I sit here and look at this phone, I'm like, that thing has some control over me. It has a bit of a claim on my life. And maybe I need to rethink how I engage with this, because I can do some good things with it, but it also wastes a lot of my time that I could be spending with other human beings, with my family, with God in prayer, doing things like this. But instead, I'll turn to this. And so I'm not even asking that, but that's the question that should be asked, is from my perspective. So
This is pretty good from C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton. C.S. Lewis says, the birth of the machines really is the greatest change in the history of Western man. The danger that Lewis detected, this is by the author Ashleman, the danger that Lewis detected is not only, as Chesterton put it, that many of the labor-saving devices save labor a good deal more than they ought by destroying the diversity of crafts and traditions, but that they discourage the expression of specifically human skills and qualities. They breed passivity in response to experience. Television discourages reading and thus literacy. The telephone discourages letter writing. The automobile discourages walking. The contraceptive discourages chastity. Planned obsolescence discourages thrift and permanence. The underlying threat of commercial civilization lies in its emphasis on the sensate and the ephemeral over the transcendental and the lasting. It encourages an obsession with objects and quantities instead of subjects and qualities, as witness the pejorative connotations of the popular media. He goes on, but you get the point. Like, the question is, what are we willing to give up to gain from this technology? So using AI, open AI, for research, for writing, is going to take away aspects of our human intellect and our own thinking power and memory. But how much are we willing to give up in order to gain from using these technologies? I don't think there's a clear line on that. I think on ethical dilemmas like things like this, it has to be a constant weighing the balances and talking about these things, not passively allowing them to just reshape society and the church. We do have to set some ethical boundaries and moral convictions, this far and no more, even if it sets us back and puts us at a disadvantage in society. If we believe that there's a point at which we're giving up too much of what it means to be a human. I know that's not a very satisfactory answer, but I think having the conversation and determining, are we giving up too much with these things, is a starting point.
Yeah, excellent. I think we're running up on time.
You got one
And
more?
yeah, one more.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's hear it.
This last one is pretty darn good too.
All right.
You did this one, didn't you?
No. My questions await you after the event.
All right.
Consider an individual born with a cognitive disability, perhaps severe autism, who, due to the condition, is not able to perceive or interact with reality in the same way that most people do. This individual's ability to communicate, form relationships, and process the world around him is significantly impaired. Now imagine that this person undergoes a dramatic transformation through a technology, such as Neuralink. This person's mental capacity improves significantly, enabling that person to engage with others in a typical, meaningful way. Eventually, this person comes to a genuine, devoted faith in Jesus Christ. What might this mean from a theological perspective? Could God use a human invention, something as complex and revolutionary as Neuralink, as a means of drawing someone closer to Him? Or would He more likely accomplish that transformation through other, more traditional or spiritual means? Building on Lance's idea that it might be God's will for me to be paralyzed, we know that God often uses suffering to shape us, to call us to action, and to inspire a zealous pursuit of serving others. Could He also use human innovation and technology in the same redemptive way?
The answer is yes. And I would think about the internet and the capabilities that we have with the invention of the internet. We have the capability to reach the entire world in a matter of seconds. That means that the gospel can go out to places that 50 years ago, no one had ever dreamed of. So the answer is yes. And I think it goes back to the question is, does it bring God glory? Is it making a person whole? to the best of your ability, where you're not going to put the person in a situation where they could be manipulated. And because throughout time, I mean, you think of the printing press, Gutenberg. Before the printing press, everything was handwritten, and you had to just make copies and copies. The printing press comes out, the Bible's available to everyone. We all have Bibles now because of him. So these innovations are very important, and God can use them. Now they can be misused as well, because you have the printing press, then you get printed pornography. But you also have, I mean, you know what it's
used by fallen
man. But I think the answer is yes. It's asking questions before you implement the innovation of what is it for, trying to work through the implications of it, and then if it's going to make someone whole, meaning that there's something missing that we can contribute, something broken that we can restore, then I would say then it's a viable option for someone. Like you mentioned, a pacemaker. Yeah, I mean, yes.
I agree. And God uses secondary causes all the time,
Right.
and he should equally get the glory for those innovations and inventions as if he just miraculously healed a person or took away a disease. He's still the author of that innovation, and because it's developed and used by man that's flawed, it's going to be misused, it's going to be perverted, and that's our responsibility. But whatever good comes of that, whatever good thing comes from that technology, God should get the glory for that.
And I've got a friend in here, I'm not going to point him out, it's a doctor. And in his office, not a doctor that can help, not a doctor that can give you a theology of health, but I'm talking about a doctor that can help you with your body. In his office, there's framed picture on the wall that says God is the source of all healing. And that is true. Can God work through medicine? Yes. Can God miraculously heal? Yes. He's he's God. But what's amazing is that God chooses to use fallen people to help other fallen people. And that's incredible, because God could just do it himself, but he chooses to do it this way. Oftentimes the miracle, God's working through someone else. And so, again, all the glory goes to God because he's the source. If the technology's there, he gave the person the mind to be able to invent it, or the treatment or whatever, he's still the source of the healing. So.
Yeah, that's good.